We're here with Michael Rectenwald today. He is the author of Springtime for Snowflakes. So, what a brilliant name for a book. And he was also a professor at NYU. Dr. Rectenwald, thank you so much for being with us. To start with, would you tell us a little bit about Springtime for Snowflakes? Why did you decide to write it, and where did you come up with such a provocative title?
I decided to write it after I had a run-in at NYU with the social justice mob, uh, and I basically tell the story of how that run-in went, and then I go back into it's a memoir. The book goes back into my education, my PhD work, and my master's work, in order to see the roots of this pernicious development, social justice, and I found it in postmodern theory. So it's the title somehow came to me out of the blue. I don't know, and I almost scratched it because there were a couple people that thought it was too provocative. In particular, um, Professor Haight, who runs the Heterodox Academy, he thought it was too provocative. But I decided to go with it because I thought it would catch some attention. And obviously, it's based on a takeoff of Mel Brooks's "Springtime for Hitler," which was a song within the producers.
And so tell us a little bit about what you discovered. When you looked into the origins of this social justice movement, what did you learn? And is this a dangerous movement? Is it just a curiosity?
I think it's very dangerous. It's a dangerous movement, and it's generating an incredible amount of problems, specifically in high schools now, and secondary and primary schools even. Um, what I discovered was that it came from various notions that are very popular in the academy, in particular, postmodern ideas of social constructionism. You know, that everything in reality is a social construction, that there's no real object world, that we interact with the world that we make collectively, socially, rather than what is there. It's a very subjectivist and idealist epistemology. And this is what makes room for such things as the gender du jour, whatever gender you might come up with, you can be. I think there's 72 now. So basically, I found social and linguistic constructivism, which is a postmodern idea, and several other things like standpoint epistemology, which comes out of Soviet theory before, well before postmodernism, but which is picked up by postmodern theorists later. Standpoint epistemology, which I can talk about if you wish. But yeah, those some of the threads that I started pulling and seeing how they connected to the current belief systems and practices.
One of the things that I've run across more and more, and I'm very curious about, I wonder if you have any thoughts on it, is the infiltration of these ideas into the churches, even the conservative
Yeah,
churches, not just Catholic Church, but also some of the evangelical churches. You had John MacArthur, who's a very prominent kind of a Calvinistic, even evangelical leader. He described the social justice movement as perhaps the most significant threat to the church today. And yet, it seems like everywhere you go, you have these social justice ideas being preached from the pulpit. That we need to be focused on racial justice and economic justice rather than the preaching of the gospel. Do you have any insight into how this made its way into the churches? I mean, how
yeah.
is it compatible with traditional Christian doctrines, or is this an alien idea that's invaded? What are your thoughts?
Okay. First of all, there's so many ideas have flown under the banner of social justice since its inception in 1841 that it's really hard to tell all the things that are involved. But let me just say this: to begin with, the contemporary social justice movement has nothing to do with the original social justice movement, which was a Catholic movement, which came from Luigi Tapparelli, a Jesuit monk, and had nothing to do with redistribution of wealth. It had to do with charity, actually.
Hmm.
And he never said that anyone should be equal, either economically or even socially, hierarchically. That there was no leveling of anything going on there. But it got adopted, and even within the Catholic Church, it was taken up by a pope, and he already adulterated it and turned it into this kind of redistribution scheme. Now, it then got into the hands of philosophers like Rawls and others who have turned it into this sine qua non thing that without which nothing exists ethically, according to them, such that it's become pervasive as a belief that equality, economic equality, and social equality is an absolute necessary goal, and that it is absolutely required of us to strive for it. That's the basis now. Then you add in a contemporary moment, they picked up Stalinist and Maoist tactics and include those within the social justice movement. So, for example, in communist China during the Cultural Revolution of 66 to 76, Mao instructed his Red Guards to basically tear down everything in the society. All tradition, all historical memory, all cultural legacies, everything should be razed to the ground. That's R-A-Z-E-D. Then there were a couple techniques involved. One was called autocritique or self-criticism. Mm-hmm. And this is where the subject denigrates themselves in front of a jury of their peers, comrades, and basically tells how horrible they are and how wrong they've been and they're ideologically flawed and blah, blah, blah. Then there's this thing called struggle sessions where the people themselves, the comrades, tear apart this person's personality and their ideology for their bourgeois, capitalist beliefs and so forth, and they just rip them to shreds. So you saw both of these things circulated into France at the moment that postmodern theory was being born. They entered into feminism first. Feminists picked up these techniques, and they have been dormant somewhat since the 70s, but they started coming back in different forms throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s, and then they festered, and they then bloomed again into a blooming blister of disgusting ideas and idiocy, such that they now are part of this new social justice left.
Yeah, you mentioned the Chinese Cultural Revolution, Michael. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Do you see any parallels between what happened in the Cultural Revolution and some of what we're seeing today in the United States with the erasing of our history, the pulling down of monuments, the silencing of criticism? Is there any parallel there at all?
Absolutely. I see it as a complete parallel. It's a softer version, but it's not any less pernicious in a sense because it's actually happening more subtly. And, it's less catastrophist, if you will, more of a gradualist campaign. But this makes it more insidious almost because it's not so blatant, So it's happening sort of surreptitiously under the surface. But it's very, 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 very much alike. They're ripping, as you said, historical monuments, historical memory, legacies of culture, all being gutted from the curriculum, in statuaries, and all forms of museums and road signs and names of schools and names of streets and on and on and on. They just want to raise the whole cultural legacy to the ground. The West is horrible, despite being that the West is best. And that's the thing that they have this guilt complex about, is the idea that the West had a belief in itself at some point. Oh my, what a terrible thing.
Well, what happens if these social justice warriors win, Michael? Suppose that conservatives, Christians, traditionalists, suppose everybody just raises the white flag and these social justice warriors are able to steamroller over us. Where does it end? What can we expect to see?
That's a frightening prospect. I would say that first, can I talk about how to combat it before we
that was my next question. Yeah, what do we do to stop it? That's so we avoid that, right? So good. Go ahead.
Yeah, before I raise the surrender sign, let's try to see what we might do to counter it.
Excellent.
First, I would think it needs to be understood that we're dealing with a religious movement, and I have nothing against religions, but I don't like Scientology either. And it's equivalent in its mass lunacy to Scientology, yet it has a much broader uh, grip on society. So once it's dubbed a religion in the U.S., at least, where it seems to be birthing most, vehemently, we can then say, look, this doctrine has to be excluded from public schools. It can't be it can be taught, but it can't be the basis of the school system, which it is now. It's happening in New York. I was just on Fox this morning talking about how the New York school system is being taken over by social justice. Well, I knew this is going on all around the country. It's not just New York. This is the creed that's been adopted. So we have to declare it a religion, get it marked clearly as a religion. Then we can use the separation clause to exclude
Michael,
it from
explain
public.
real quick to people who aren't familiar with this idea. Explain real quick how could you call this a religion? What
Okay.
does it have in common with, say, a different religion?
It has rituals,
Okay.
uh, like the ones I mentioned. For example, struggle sessions, auto critique, and there's other rituals that I could enumerate, but they don't come to me right this second. But also, it is a belief system that is based strictly on belief and no data. It is not an evidence-based system. It is, for example, if somebody declares their gender to be male or female, there's no empirical data that is necessary. They just merely state it, right? So it's a belief that's enunciated, and that's the end of it. And we have to believe that and go along with it. And everybody must play along. I think Christianity has more data than it by a long shot, but it is nevertheless merely a belief system with no knowledge base at all. So it's ritualistic, and it's a belief system with no knowledge base at all. It's completely based on the credulity of anyone who buys into it, and it has no. So therefore, I'd say we can dub this thing a religion if we have to go into a treatise to do so. I mean, I talked about it a bit in the book, but I could develop it further.
Fantastic. And so, what's the best way to stop it then? So we declare it a religion, get it kicked out of the government school system to start
Right.
with,
Yeah.
and
Then other
and
schools, if
what
they want
next?
to be a social justice school, go ahead, be a social justice school. But like a Christian school, they would say this is a Christian academy or something like that. Oh,
Yeah, and
okay,
don't
you
do it with
can
tax money, I guess, right?
right. That's fine. You have the freedom to do that here in this country, but it should be pretty illicit. It should be rather specific, and it should be explicitly stated rather than implicitly, insidiously undermining everything without being acknowledged as such. So I would say, yeah, get it out of the public system through that clause. I think there has to be some sort of a mass action taken, some sort of a class action suit of some sort, in which numbers of parents and other people rise up and say, "Look, this is crazy. This is religion. It's being perpetrated against our will, and we're supposed to have the separation of church and state in the United States." That doesn't mean anti-religion. It just means that religion isn't official. We don't have an official church like in England, which they still do. The Anglican Church is the official state church. We don't have that here, and this is basically taking that position without being declared as such. Then you'll have make make it explicit what your school's about. You'll have universities that are going to be private and they can do whatever they want, and you have public universities that should also have the same rules applied to them, and that would change things dramatically because I'm telling you that it's not just in the Ivies, Harvard, where it's really out of control. Penn, Yale, all these places are completely indoctrinating students this way. But it's also in the middle states, you know, regional universities all over the country. You'll see this. Just type in grammar is racist in Google.
And math is racist too, apparently, huh?
What's that? Math
And
is
math is
definitely
also
racist.
racist. Yeah.
It's colonialist, imperialist, and racist, and it's also androcentric. It's what else? It's a bunch of things. It's real bad. Math
Yeah.
is horrible.
I mean, this is crazy talk, obviously, Michael, to anybody with common
Yeah.
sense. But how would a parent inoculate their child against this?
That's
Obviously, the
a great,
educators have gotten pretty good at this. How would a parent prepare their child to confront this?
wow, that's a great question. Inoculation is the key. Um, Well, if the kid is under 17, I guess hold off on the Nietzsche. But
Okay.
after that, uh, Nietzsche, for all his flaws as a lunatic, is actually pretty good inoculation against this stuff. Um, because he doesn't buy into egalitarianism as this, absolute creed. And of course, these people aren't egalitarian. I want to say that they're really about inverting the hierarchy. They want to make the bottom the top. And he talks about this quite a bit, Nietzsche, about how inversion ideologies work to flip the hierarchy by saying that being poor and being the least, being the lowest is best. Those are the ones that are really the best and the greatest. So I would say educate them about what's going on. Be explicit. Also, to pick up cues from your child. Like, for example, what are you doing tomorrow? Well, we're going to have a transition party for Tommy. I mean Terry. This has happened. This happened in California already, where kindergartners were having a transition party for one of the students.
Okay.
And if the parents, we also got to get the laws changed, because right now, in many states, if a parent tries to object to the child's gender, they could actually lose the child.
Yeah.
In some states.
Yeah,
So
and in Canada too, I saw that now.
Pardon?
And in Canada as well, and some of the European countries now. Yep. Incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so transgenderism should not be understood as anything but a major piece of the social justice creed and movement. And there's this huge push for everybody to change their genders for some reason. I mean, of course, there's pharmaceuticals.
And what is the ultimate agenda, Michael? So, I mean, obviously, getting children to mutilate their genitals is not an end in and of itself, I wouldn't think. Where are they going with this? Do they have some kind of master plan?
I thought it might be a giant sausage factory, but I'm not sure about that. But I'm thinking that, okay, basically they want to destabilize all social ontologies, all right? Because this is the means by which the state becomes all powerful, or the corporate state, if you will. If we're going to be putting all this state power into Google and other, what I think are state apparatuses at this point. I mean, they were funded by the CIA in the first place, right? Yep. So the idea is to completely raise the social ontologies to the ground, to upend all. The family has to go. The reason. So you have to have, for a family, typically you have a man and a wife, or a husband and a spouse, or a man and a woman. Well, if you get rid of those, you're 90% way finished with the family, with the nuclear family. And that's definitely one of the objectives. They want to get rid of the family because the family is a buffer. It's an ideological and instrumental and educative barrier to the all-powerful statism that
so
these
this is a totalitarian movement, then, Michael. These people want totalitarian government, in other words.
Totalitarians at the core, they're absolutely totalitarian. They want total control and power, and they want it vested in the state, and they want to be in the state themselves.
And once they get it, then what do they do with it? And what do they do with dissenters? I mean, what's going to happen to us?
Well, it's already happening. I mean, you see it going on, at least digitally, right? You see all these digital disappearances taking place. And then you see the restriction of movement of people that are on the right, or anything but left whack jobs. For example, like Laura Loomer can't even go into the UK. Milo Yiannopoulos cannot go into Australia. So they're already putting these digital fences up, which is the next step. And I talk about all this in my next book, which is out this month, Google Archipelago. They're erecting these digital gulags, if you will, and then also digitally deleting people, in effect. Because once you have all the public sphere transferred onto the digital realm, and then the digital realm is controlled by people that are actually statists that are also corporates. I mean, this is just this crazy amalgamation of state and corporate power that's going on. Whereas, I'm all for free markets, but this is not free markets at all. This is absolute statist monopolies, right? So these monopolies want global state one nation. They want to get rid of nationalism. Of course, they hate Trump because he's a nationalist. They want to get rid of borders. They want to get rid of everything that stands in the way of one worldism or globalism, to be blatant about it.
Wow, this has been fascinating, Michael, and it sounds pretty terrifying. Tell us, have you got a website where people can learn more, and how do people get a copy of Springtime for Snowflakes, and where can people find the Gulag, the Google Archipelago? I'm really looking forward to reading that. So, where can people find these?
You can go to michaelrectenwald.com. That's Michael, Michael, Rectenwald, Rectenwald.com. Sorry for the long name. And
That's not your fault.
yes, and that you pronounce it properly too, Rectenwald. You can click on those book titles right there. It'll take you straight to a source to buy them. I'm not going to mention the source's name, but they happen to dominate.
Right. I know who you're thinking, right?
Yes,
And
right.
I hear they have a lot of transgender policies too. Well,
Oh,
Dr.
they
Rechtenwald, oh, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you for blowing the whistle on this stuff. Best of luck to you on your new books. Is there anything you want to conclude with? Something I didn't ask you about? Any final remarks you want to offer to the viewers there? What should they be thinking about? What should they be doing?
they should be thinking about how to get Michael Rectenwald an endowed professorship somewhere, because
I love it.
because otherwise we have a completely tilted, like there's nobody else in America that's standing up to this in the professoriate. You have a number of them in Canada. You have Jordan Peterson, you have Janice Fiamengo, you have Gad Sad, and you have others up there. What's the matter with the United States professoriate? It's completely gutted. So yeah, I mean, just think about how we can get back these institutions, because they have taken the long march through institutions as Gromsky, their hero, promised. And they've won at this point. They have won at this point. It's not over till it's over, though.
Yeah. Hey, well, Dr. Rechtenwald, thank you so much. Keep fighting the good fight, and hopefully we will catch up with you again very soon.